wanted
Larry Bachman, your old friend.
Everywhere on it.
Yep.
What years did you fly the B-25?
I started flying the B-24
B-20.
Liberator at 19.
Oh, you did.
I enlisted out of high school.
Okay.
I enlisted the day after I graduated from Washburn High School, but they didn't call you in right away. At that time, they had been taking in 1,000 new cadets. And so it was a year and a half before I got called in. And I was sent, because I had no college training at all, I had to go to a college and pass equivalency tests on many different subjects. In fact, one of the subjects was English, but it was code and meteorology and navigation and many other subjects where you were required to have a college equivalency. And the only test I failed in a whole bunch of them was code. When they taught code, they would transfer to you, and instead of headphones, the message, dit, da, 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 dit. Now, the first thing the instructor said was, whatever you do, don't count, don't repeat what you hear. A stubborn German like me, and I started counting right away. SOS, I knew, and a few other phrases that I knew. But when he gave the test, he speeded the transmission up to more than double of what it was during training. And I got lost. I mean, about 3 words that I got out of the whole test. And he dismissed the whole class except for me. He said, Bachman, you stay back here. I got to talk to you. And when the crowd cleared, he came back and said, I know what you did. You counted, didn't you? I said, yes, I did. Well, he said, you can't do that. You remember I told you not to? I said, yeah, but it seemed so easy to repeat it. Easier to retain. And the long short of that story is that he said, whatever you do, you're going to wait for this guy to shut down here pretty quick. At any rate, he said, I know what you did, and I'll give you another chance. Tomorrow, I'll give you the test over. He said, tonight you better study. The only place that has a light all night is in your room. I sat on my phone the whole night, opened good book, memorized everything that I could. The next day, passed with a 73-page assembly test. I went my girl and called my, I sent a letter to the folks at home. That I made it. I was sure I was going to be walking out the track. And later on, after our training, if you were assigned training in a full-engine aircraft, you knew you were going to be flying bombers. Everybody wanted to be a fighter pilot. And no question about it, we all wanted to be a fighter pilot. That doesn't work. If you had twin-engine advanced training, you were obligated to be a bomber pilot.
Yeah.
Anything from B-25s to B-17s to B-24s. And of course, I love the B-24. I really did. It's harder to fly than 17, but it's a smoother bombing platform. It was the first airplane built that has the flex wing. That on the 24 that's we're under, the tip of that wing will go up 18 inches and down 18 inches from the way it is on the ground. So it has this movement. And on any place where there's turbulence, the airplane in front of you, that'll leave the air going in circles, depending on which way the prop is. But at any rate, that was taken up in that flex wing that he built. This David R. Davis was a self-taught aeronautical engineer. All of it was in his head. And he decided on this plane he wanted to have that flex wing. And the result is that when you were in turbulent air, that thing absorbed that thrust in the wingtips. On the 17, if you hit turbulence in that, you bounce. I mean, it's a solid wing. All other planes are solid wings except 24. Of course, it's easier plane. The 17 is an easier plane to fly, but when you're talking about a bombing platform, it's much better in the 24 because the shock of those airwaves is taken up in that flapping wing.
Now, is it true that you were checked out in B-17s also?
Yes, I checked out for the first pilot position in both planes and passed. Then it was my choice as to which one I wanted to fly. And of course, the 24 just stands out to me as being the best airplane at that time it was built. More B-24s were built than any other aircraft by any country during World War II. Just a total of slightly less than 20,000 total. 9,000 of this variant. The J model was more widely used and built. They actually built 9,000 J models like this. That's the one I flew and loved it. Absolutely thrilled to fly. It's harder to fly than on the 17. It was an easier plane to fly, but it wasn't all that I expected.
Now, what was your typical bomb load? What pound?
8,000 pounds. Yeah, and the 17 carries only 6,000 pounds.
And they were 500-pound bombs or
1,000 pounds.
1,000-pound bombs?
Well, it could be 8 1,000-pound bombs or 16 500-pound bombs, and it goes on down to 100 pounds. The ones we carried with napalm in them and so forth to set buildings afire would be 100 pounds, but it's a pretty good load of those. 8,000 pounds of those. And the others, the 1,000-pounders, were used to break open dams, to flood areas. If you were dropping on a particular building, the impact of the shell would cover 40 feet in each direction. 40 feet that way, 40 feet that way, 40 feet up, and 40 feet down. We got hit by 2 of those 80-millimeter shells right behind the cockpit. 6 inches behind the cockpit is a firewall. And on that firewall are transfer pumps. And you could transfer fuel from that wingtip clear over to the other end. It's 110 feet, 6 inches of wingspan. And you could, the inside of the wings has nothing but gas tanks. The first ones were just plastic, but then they put in the ones that are self-sealers. If the bullet went into it, you could easily close so you don't lose the fuel. But I don't know. There's 27 ports on the upper side of the wing. To refuel, you have to open every one of those ports. There's a cover on it that has to be wired shut first. You take that off, open the hatch, and then open the tank's top and drop your hose in it and fill it. Now, to begin with, it used to be 25 missions. If you flew 25, you were sent home. Then they raised it to 30. And then I flew 5 extra missions to make it 35, but 30 was the required number. That was both in the 17 and the 24 in that theater. Now, other theaters, the ones that flew out of Italy, for example, had to go over a mountain on their route into a target, and they got credit for 2 missions. So you'll hear some of these people say, well, I flew 55 missions. No, he didn't. He flew probably 26 or something like that, but you got credit for 2 when you had to go over a mountain with your bomb hose. And it was, there were a lot of crashes. You could make it over those knobs. And then there were fields every 5 miles. You could imagine you're sitting on an airfield right now, but 5 miles away there's another either fighter base or bomber base, and that surrounds you for miles. Upper Anglia, East Anglia, is where all the bases were. Well, they had them in southern England too, but in England, most of them were in this upper area. And when you took off, you had to spiral in the circle and climb to 15,000 feet, at which time you had to put your oxygen mask on, and from that time you wore that till you got landed again. And your temperature at altitude was never less than 54 below, and was often at 64 below. And relief tubes. When I talk to school kids, the first one they question, how did you ever go to the bathroom? Well, you really didn't. You went through a relief tube. But the first guy that used it, that would freeze in there. Next guy got a bath. I mean, it was very no ultra-modern toilets in a 24. It's just a relief tube, that's all.
You know, Larry, when you talk about that, and I, of course, understand very well what you're talking about, but as far as the amount of hours, what was your typical flight time out on target and back?
For us, the longest mission I flew was 10 hours and 50 minutes. And I flew all but 10 minutes of that flight. We were situated, the lead plane was here, alternate lead and a deputy lead. We flew that deputy lead position. And the other pilot, I was assigned as a co-pilot to start with, and he would do the flying at first ones, but when we were assigned that position and every mission was assigned the same location, he couldn't see across the cockpit to see how close he was to the next airplane. And I wound up flying on a 10-hour and 50-minute flight. I flew all but 10 minutes of that flight. Now others that fly 24s, X and some of the other guys, traded off every 20 minutes. It is a strain. They always used to say, always tell a B-24 pilot, because his left arm is more muscular than the right. Well, your controls are on that arm and your throttles are on the other one. And you see who's sneaking up on us here?
Yes, I do.
Hi,
Good morning,
Bob.
Mr. Clemens.
Thank you.
You must.
Yeah. Okay, I'll take a sip. Hi.
Hi.
Get in there. Here, sit down. Sit down.
You flew out of England?
Yeah.
Oh, where?
Do you want to ask him a question?
Windward, halfway
What
between
do you want to ask him?
Queensland and Norwich,
Oh.
up near the wash.
My dad flew in 17s out
He's a
of
pilot.
Sudbury.
Oh,
Want to ask him a question?
And he had a friend named Carl Fogelberg who was a B-24 pilot.
yeah.
He used to fly one of
for
his
you guys.
aircraft.
There were missions, there were fields every 5 miles.
That's what I hear, yeah.
A lot of bomber fields, but also some fighter ones.
Okay.
The bomber fields were built by the same contractor, so from the air you had a heck of a time finding your own base
I bet.
because the runways were all laid out the
They could
same.
try.
We
They
were
could try. Where about
given a new plane after 5 missions of flying old, worn out
Yeah.
planes.
Uh-huh.
We were assigned a new aircraft.
Every 5 missions?
No. At the time I entered, we just had these worn out planes.
Yeah.
The engines would quit on takeoff,
Yeah.
and there were patches on patches just holding the gun together, a bunch of steel, no, aluminum.
Yeah.
At any rate, the CEO said, the next new airplane that comes in is going to be yours. 2 days later, the telephone rang in our barracks area, and your plane is coming in today. If you want to come down and watch it land, you certainly can.
Yeah.
So all 10 of us marched down and watched this. Prior to this, all the planes we had were olive drab, this color.
Yeah.
But here comes this silver one. Made a circle of the field,
Uh-huh.
came and landed on the second pass, and out stepped 2 gals, 22, 23 years old,
Better yet.
damn good looking. Couldn't believe it. They stepped out and I said, well, where did you bring this in from? Wales or Scotland? Because we used to fly planes into 2 locations. Whenever they needed a replacement, they would call and have one flown into the field to replace it. But on this one, first silver airplane that flew over there, and these 2 gals stepped out of it. I asked them where they came from. They said, the States. I said, the States? Yeah. We flew it from the States. I said, well, where's the rest of your crew? We're it. 2 gals,
No kidding.
22, 23 years
I know
old.
they did a lot of delivering.
Yeah. And they would take wounded back in an older plane.
Oh.
And they made several trips flying plants to the different field. But to find your field, when there's fields 5 miles away in every direction, and all the runways looked exactly the same because the same contractor built them, but they always were into the wind, you know, they were laid out so that you were taking off into the wind and landing into the wind. So,
You know, I know you went in formation, like larger planes leaving, and it takes a long time to get formation.
yeah.
But then you straggle back.
You had a fixed position that your planes were going to fly once you got to altitude.
Yeah.
But when you took off, you had to stay within a cone and climb to 13,000 feet.
Yeah.
Very restricted.
It took a long time.
Yeah, quite a while. And you got 8,000 pounds of bombs aboard, 3,700 gallons of gasoline. It's on the ground. The empty weight of it is about 36,000 pounds. When it's loaded with bombs and fuel, it's 64 or 65,000. Yeah, it's just about double.
Yeah.
There's so many stories of incidents.
I have one question. B-17 Dad said they had taken guns out of it. Did you have to do it, or why?
Well, they did take them out and clean them if they were
Just for
fired.
cleaning.
Yeah, if they hadn't fired a gun, they didn't take them out. But they did that's part of your ground crew's duty.
Yeah.
Take them out, get the guns cleaned and remounted.
Morning, how are you?
They weren't out overnight necessarily, but if they were fired, they were cleaned before outdoors.
We ended up crash landing in Russian House Germany. He said their planes that day was really tired.
Yeah.
Like you said, they were all beat up.
Yeah,
That's
they
what
were.
he said.
They were, to begin with, it was really,
The day they were going to pick off, they just got the guns in, and then they discovered flak they had missed, so then they had to take a spare. And that's the plane that crashed landed.
a lot of, well, the Germans followed us right to our field, often, and straight to the field. We landed, but they strafed the field, even trying to catch up to you and knock it out while you were taxiing. They were brave, smart.
Yeah.
I was in the plane when the first jet was flown. He came through our formation. I'll never forget the expression on that guy's face. We had never heard of a jet. We knew about the B-2 buzz bombs that went to London, but never heard of an airplane flying. And we saw him as he came in. And the Germans had built just a few 232s and never enough to do training in them. They trained the pilots to take off and land, but left the rest to their... And they actually... You better be careful there.
You got your church, guys. Get it done.
Yeah. My other car was a no, I wouldn't. I do drive a Mercedes, but not that model.
We were talking about your formation and so forth. As far as, did you ever fly as a pathfinder?
No. Well, we were knocked out of our position one time. And usually what happens is the fighters would go after these stragglers that lost an engine or couldn't keep up with the formation, and they'd blast away at them till they knocked them out. Luckily, when we got hit, they were still chasing the main flow of planes to the target, and so they left it without our we had no knowledge of it yet, hadn't heard of it.
Yeah.
This guy came through the formation and rolled up on the side, cockpit open toward me, and I can swear to God, he wasn't 3 feet away from the plane, on an angle, going through the formation. His eyes were like teacups, and his mouth was like a saucer. He was just a
Holding his
pig.
breath.
Well, yeah, he was frightened to death. He thought he was going to crash. And that wasn't what his intent was. But they hadn't trained them for rate of closure or anything like that. They didn't know or realize how fast they were. He's coming at me 550 miles an hour, and I'm going the other way at 220 miles an hour. And he's gone. But like I say, I saw his face as close as I see yours right now. And hi, that's a nice airplane.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, he's a pilot. He sat there.
You made a good landing. Look at the engine go.
He picked out the B-24. I went on how the B-17.
Well, I like the 24 better. I checked out in both the 17 and the 24 as first pilot. I chose to fly the 24.
It was newer, bigger, and faster.
Well, I just loved the airplane. I really did. It's 8,000 pounds on the 24, 6,000 pounds on the 17 for load. But like I said, it's about 3,300 or 3,400 pounds empty. or just a little gas,
Yeah.
and no bombs. Loaded, it's 64 or 65,000 pounds.
How many hours did you fly at a time?
10 hours and 50 minutes was the longest flight
That
I
would be a
did.
long.
But the ones out of Italy flew longer. They flew out of Foggia, Italy, up over the mountains, and they were given credit for 2 missions every time they did that. So when you hear somebody say they flew 55 missions, they might have flown 26. Yeah, but nobody begrudged them because to get up over the mountains with a full load,
Yeah.
17 or 24,
Yeah.
it was quite a feat. There were a lot of crashes.
My dad flew, they went down and their 6 missions.
Yeah,
And that was unusual.
yeah,
But his friend, both were 50.
yeah.
He re-up, came home and got married. After 25, he could have been off and went 25 more.
When the war ended in Europe, we flew our plane back to the States. It was relatively new. We had a total of 46 missions on it, most of which we flew. But on days when we were given a pass to go to London after 10 missions or so, somebody else would fly my plane.
Yeah.
And so when the war ended, it had 46 missions, but it was still like brand new. And
Did they envision that plane would go to Asia?
yeah, this particular plane went to India. Same model as I flew, but mine wound up when we flew back. We landed at Westover Field, Massachusetts, and then they flew out to Kingman, Arizona, and cut it up for scrap.
Yeah.
I cried that day. I mean it. I really did. I just
How
loved
many
it.
are left flying?
You're looking at it.
One.
One. Out of just short of 20,000 that were built, this is the only flyable
How
24.
many 17?
Probably 12 or 14 that are flyable, and there's more than that on static display.
Yeah.
But we built more B-24s than any other airplane during World War II. No country built more at the time.
Were you going to retrain on the 29th?
No, on a B-32 is what I was assigned to when we come back. We wound up at Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and that was a holding base. Yeah, but it was a holding base for all of the European pilots and crew. So we all went out there, and we were supposed to go into training in B-32s, which was the equivalent of the B-24, but larger, heavier bomb loads. They only built, I think, about 800 of them. Only 500 of those ever flew. But
Your dad's crew was going to be trained on B-29. He came and got married and
Yeah.
was ready,
Yeah.
and then the war ended.
and of course the B-29s took over
Yeah.
before there were many 32s built.
Yeah, you don't hear much about 32.
No. I think there were a total of 800 and only 500 ever saw a flight.
Why don't you talk a little bit about the
Yeah, I'll hold that
armament
for
on
you.
board?
I'll hold it.
Yeah.
I'll give them to me. Thank you.
I should talk a little bit about the armament. The only armament that's on the airplane is the seat the pilot and co-pilot sit in, and the backrest is that and the seat, 1/4-inch thick steel. And then there's a patch that was bolted on the outside. I don't even know if it's on this one or not. But right beside the cockpit would be outside of the fuselage. They bolted on another piece of armament so you were protected from the side with the back. But the Germans learned that to get a plane down, they came in from the front, made a frontal attack, came at you and fired as they went through your formation. And the first jet that I ever saw came along and did that exact maneuver, came in diving in the cockpit, and at the very last minute, he flipped up like on the side and tore past. He was doing 550 miles an hour. We're doing 220 this way. When he went by, it was just, he was gone. He never opened fire. They didn't train their pilots. They didn't have enough of them to train anybody except for takeoff and landing. The only instruction they got was how to take off and how to land it, but not to engage in combat.
But you talk about the gunners, the caliber and
We
waist
had
gunners, tail gunners.
10 guns on this, 2 in the nose, 2 in the back turret, 2 in the top turret, and the rest were singles. Along the side of the ship, you see a dark hole there. That's open during flight. It has a little pin on the front end that directs the air away from that opening, but that's just a little narrow pin. But it was a tough place to be. A waist gunner. First of all, they're not lined up directly across from each other in the fuselage. One is forward, one is back a little bit. Because when the 50 calibers are firing, I can't tell you the number per second, but I mean it's a continuous flow of 50 caliber machine guns, and the cases are all falling on the floor of the ship. When you fired your old round that was loaded for you, you're working on top of those, sliding every move you make. It was a tough spot.
Was it real loud in there when they were being fired?
Oh yeah.
Smoky or?
No, not bad.
Loud.
When you speak of smoking too, when you start the engines, this one is pretty smooth and very little exhaust. On the 17, you'll see a cloud of blue smoke from the engine catches. But it's always this big puff of blue smoke.
Oil pools on the bottom.
Here's another B-24 specialist right behind you. Yeah. Yeah.
So you used to walk engines through
Yeah.
the side to get that out.
Yeah, and on this plane, Collins bought this plane. It was shipped back from India on barges. They took it apart, took an engine on a barge and some small parts and a larger one for the fuselage, and they pushed those barges from India to India, I should say. They were reassembled there, and then this airplane wound up on a scrap pile, and one of the guys from England heard about them tearing up all the last B-24s that they had in India. And so he went over and looked at it. It was already on the scrap pile, but he said, I think I could take that home and rebuild it for a static display. So he bought it and hired 5 barges. He took an engine on each barge and fuselage on a larger barge, pushed that all the way back to London. And when the people heard that this B-24 was going to be reassembled, they just all went nuts out there on the East Coast and offered their help and so forth. But then he said he was going to repair it and just use it for static display. And they said, well, then we're done. We're not going to help you anymore. You've got to make this thing flyable. And all of the B-24 people along the whole East Coast went in to help. Thousands of guys put in hours to rebuild this one. And it's the only flyable B-24 today. start, but have you ever written your whole story? Have you ever written your whole story in a book? Okay. Two of us have got to get our heads together. Unfortunately, in my case, I used to go out and give talks to schools, and I've got a string of pictures. It's still a pretty good area here, but and the kids love it. Their first question out of the box, of course, is, how did you go to the toilet? Well, there's only one way, and that's a relief tube. The first guy that uses it, nobody uses it again because it would freeze in the tube. That wouldn't flow out, so you got a bath. But at any rate, that was the kid's approach. But I passed things around in the classroom, let them handle it. Shrapnel from within the airplane, and I had my logbook. Somebody snatched that, took it away, that had every detail of every flight we took. The bomb load, the weight of the fuel, takeoff weight, landing weight, and so forth. Real detail, and of course a lot about the targets. That disappeared, and I have no other record of it at all.
Larry, I want you to tell them something. This is a piece of shrapnel. It's flat that I got. Tell them about the size of the one you came home with.
Well, I had over 20 pieces of shrapnel, but some of them were as large as like that, and then on down to the small sizes. But a lot of them show the milling that's on that shell. We have an 88 millimeter shell in the building over here. Get a chance to come in and I'll point out the features of an 88 millimeter German shell. The propellant that sends the core up is probably that high, full of enough energy to take a 32-pound shell up to as high as 32,000 feet. Then there is an adjustable device that they put on their bomb too that would, you could set it to bomb to a burst at 28,000 feet or 30,000 feet or 32,000 feet. So all the bombs would go off at one level as they fired. They had two cannons mounted on a rail car, and they'd move that from target to target. We did a pretty good job and wiped out some important building. They'd move it to the next prominent place. Marshalling yard, where trains are made up, or refineries where they're taking crude oil into pliable fluids and so forth. We always bombed strategic bombing. The only time we were ever allowed to drop free will was if our 10-pence cloud cover covered our target area. They would often say, you're pick a target of opportunity, and you fly to some place where you can visually see buildings from 30,000 feet. And the day before a bombing of a city or a building or any one of these places, a P-38 would have flown over and taken pictures. He was above where we were. But when they enlarged those pictures, they came out roughly 2 by 3 feet. And they're so accurate that you could read Wilson on a soccer ball on the field when it's been blown up like that. And they'll take that map that they made before you're going to bomb the next day and mark out primary targets within. If it's a refinery, storage tanks, cracker plant over here, and rail yards that go through it, and so forth. Marshalling yards where trains were made up. We never knew whether it was going to be American soldiers being hauled to a prison camp or Germans being moved, but we were marshalling yards were a prime target for us. But it was strategic bombing. We would not go in over a city normally and just raise hell with it. I mean, it had to have a building that was of some consequence to the Germans. And that was held as pretty set the same. You didn't deviate from that. But eventually, both B-24 and 17 were both built to have a belly turret underneath. The gunner in a belly turret is cramped up as much as he could be, knees up into his shoulders and sitting in this ball. And the only way he could get in or out of it was to have that ball raised up inside the fuselage, and the hatch was on top. He could not open it from the inside. He couldn't raise the ball up. It had to be done from within the airplane by other gunners, waist gunners, and so forth. Now, if that jammed for any reason and you couldn't get it up, even to approach raising it again, he had to dip that down, and the two 50 caliber machine guns were pointed right down straight under him. And when you came in for a landing, if you couldn't have gotten that back up into the fuselage, the first thing to hit was those two guns underneath. And they would twirl that ball like a bowling ball, and it would release from the socket that it was traveling in, both radius and both ways, and it would drop out, and it would go down the runway like a bowling ball with him in it, and nobody survived it. So we were losing so many belly turret gunners that they finally took it out and then put a radar dome in that spot. And then we carried what we called a Mickey operated with, ran this radar equipment, and he could see through 10-tenths cloud cover the outline of the building. And having studied the map that was made by the P-38 the day before, he could pick out a specific building, even through 10-tenths cloud cover. It would show the outline of the building, and you'd know it, headquarters or whatever. So that was a blessing in disguise, because we were killing off those ball-guarded gunners constantly.
Volunteer for that job.
Yeah, tough job. Yeah. We had one mission where two 88mm shells hit simultaneously. They were fired from two cannons that were mounted on a rail unit that they could quit from one place to another. If you did a pretty good job on a given target, they'd move that gun emplacement to a new location, another city that had a prime target. And it was, really, they could move it from town to town quite fast by rail. And they fired that at us. Two 88mm shells hit simultaneously right from underneath the cockpit and came up right behind the seat. 6 inches behind the seat of this plane is a firewall. On the firewall are mounted transfer pumps. You could transfer fuel from the end of that wing clear out to the end of the other side. 110-foot 6-inch wingspan. It has 27 ports on the upper side, each of which have to be filled individually to get the gas load up to what's used. We would often taxi out to the runway. It took 70 gallons to go from the hard stand out to the runway to take off. Now, if you're on a real long mission, we'd shut the engines down and the fuel truck would come in and drop 70 more gallons into the tanks. And often that's about 10 tanks, that last 70 gallons. The planes out of Italy would often fly with less than a full bomb load, and then they'd put a May West tank in here that was used to ferry the planes for long distances. They would drop out one rack of bombs and put a big tank in there that held gasoline, held up to 300 gallons. And, that was used on long missions of some force out of Italy. We didn't have that on very often. Once when we made our deep penetrations to Berlin, we had one of those Nicholas tanks in West bombs. Normally it's an 8,000 pound load on 24, it's a 6,000 pound load on 17.
Larry, what was your cruising speed?
220. It is
The full bomb load?
yeah, it's redlined at 280. So if you were in a dive or something, you would go over 280 or you'd tear a wing. But yeah, it was a fast jet, faster than 17. Carried a heavier bomb load, harder to fly than 17. They always said they could tell a B-24 pilot because his left arm has got more muscle. He's doing all the steering and up and down with the left arm, and the right arm is on the throttles. So if you saw a guy walking around with big muscles on his left arm and said he was a B-24 pilot, that's about it too. Here's a B-17. Here's a B-24 guy. So either they can verify what I said, or
How old are you?
I'll be 89 next month. Yeah, 20th of August. Getting up there. Yeah, I got to get going on it. Oh, the other thing that happened to me is, remember the fire they had in Kansas City? All my records are gone. Everything. Yeah. I thought I picked, because I had in that mass of papers was a copy of all the missions I flew through, and that's gone. And, oh yeah, I did. I got over in 40. I graduated from high school when I was 41. 41? Yeah. And I enlisted the next day. Yeah. But they didn't call us up right away because they had made a call. They had 1,000 cadets sign up. And so it was a month and a half before I got called in. And then, of course, I hadn't gone to college. So I had to go to college training detachment for 6 months to get college equivalency on many subjects. I got a kick out of it because we even studied English. But it was meteorology and it was, yeah, code is the one that darn near broke me. You know, I don't know. We gotta ask these guys. They just filled it yesterday. Changed tires They're not soft. They don't give you much cushion on the landing, on the main gear.
I wish I'd have gone up to that.
Oh, yeah.
Got in and fell down and hurt my hip.
Oh.
Small person.
Yeah. And And you know, we always used to pull the props through.
Yeah, get the oil in.
Yeah, get the oil
Yeah,
in
listen
the
to
prop
that.
cylinders. But these guys here don't do it. And I said, why aren't you? You know, they were throwing pistons. Well, it isn't that. You got to get oil to the top cylinder.
Yeah.
But then you got to start it right away. These guys were pulling through to begin with. But then they let it stand for a half hour. All the oil would drain down. You had that tremendous pressure in the lower cylinders. They replaced engines. I mean, the 16 times I've sponsored these planes, we've changed engines at least 4 times.
Slow time.
Oh yeah. Never full throttle. A fourth less than full throttle.
It's like automobiles years ago.
Yeah.
You know, we have to do it.
Right.
Break.
What were some of your targets?
The last target was Berlin. But German cities, but we also bombed Switzerland twice.
Really?
That's a neutral country.
Yeah, of course.
No. But a general was leading our entire flight that day. We had squadrons behind him. But when we got to our target, it was 10 pence cloud cover. And at that point, planes were veering off. They didn't stay in formation because you couldn't see the wingtip of the next guy. You couldn't see your own wingtip sometimes. And so I saw him below me, and I know it was his plane at the markings and so forth, the general. So I had a group of 5 of us that stayed together. I radioed to them and said, let's hook onto the general down here. So we dropped down and flew in formation behind him. And my navigator was watching. We had a radar operator on board at that time. And my navigator came up and said, we're headed to Switzerland. I said, well, you'll turn off soon, sure. So we kept on going. Well, he didn't turn. He came back again and says, we're over Switzerland right now. So I broke radio silence to the general and said, check your position. He came back, follow me. I did that twice. When we got into Switzerland and told me we were over Switzerland, I did the same thing again. Same thing. Follow me. A couple of seconds later, he came on and opened Bombay doors. And he was in control of the droppings of all of the planes in our squadron that day. And he could toggle a switch there and our bomb would fall out. We had no control over what we were going to go. It could be said so that he was the lead guy. His aim was to get the planes close together and be more forceful to a smaller area. One shell, 80mm shell, when it explodes, the concussion from the shell itself will go 40 feet in each direction, up, down, out, sideways. On our ship, 2 shells came up and hit us from underneath, right behind the cockpit. Behind the cockpit is a 6-inch opening, and then there's a firewall. And the firewall has transfer pumps on it. And my top turret gunner would come down out of his turret periodically and transfer fuel from one side to the other to keep the load level. If you were burning fuel from over here, the wing would tend to go up. And you're flying this way, and you want to be real level. So he dropped down and transferred fuel until we were level again. And he was also able to transfer fuel to each individual engine. When we got hit, that firewall was disintegrated. The transfer pumps shot out. A stream of 100 octane gasoline about 3 inches in diameter just pouring into the cockpit. We were soaked from head to foot with 100 octane gasoline. No sparks, no cigarettes. But luckily, we didn't have a problem. When the bombs are hanging in a bomb rack, when that lets go, everything goes as it should. It gives off a spark that's an electric charge that is absorbed into the airplane. But luckily, none of that happened. We made it. When we had to turn, we couldn't keep up with the formation at all, so we turned to go back. That's when the fighters would normally come in and pick off the stragglers. But that day, our whole squadron that was left, with the general running it, the 5 planes with it, they went back to try and knock the stragglers down. Luckily, they didn't do it to us that day, because we were sitting ducks out there. We lost 2 engines immediately when the first bomb went off. The other one knocked the inboard out. We came back the last 30 miles on one outboard engine and losing altitude of course all the way. My navigator and the radar operator had calculated the loss of gas. We would never make it across the channel between Western Europe and England was about 36 miles. And they said, we're going to go down and go away with it. He said, we're going to make it. I'm going to make it. No, it'll never be done. I wish I'd have put some money on that. I stretched it out and got it. We landed on Flight Cliffs of Dover. It's a 7,000-foot emergency runway. I got up high enough to, at the last moment, with every ounce of energy was left. We got very wounded.
Those White Cliffs and Dover were like mother and home, everything. Every way that also, as you approach that channel, particularly if you're low or losing altitude, by the time we came back, maybe too high, maybe plane, maybe full plane, two engines, about 80 miles an hour. But any time that we came back, that plane was there. They would watch people in 6-foot seas, and the channel was always enough. Even at 6-foot seas, they land beside the bomber, put that blue up. Right now, just there.
Part of your training, the last thing they do is, train you to get out of your seat and out of the airplane in 13 seconds. I'm telling you, time you're on track, way out, drop down to the nose wheel. That 13 seconds goes by so fast. But we were trained to get out of it because at 13 seconds is about as long as speed before the water.
To get out of your ditch.
Pilot. So how many missions did you have? Wonderful. I needed someone to help me. So, what's going on?
That would go.
They're both B-24.
Downhill the next one. And then down to 30. And then I flew 5 extra. So I had 35 minutes. Last one.
Go on this side, guys.
That was the longest one I flew. 10 hours.
What were those targets in Berlin? What were your targets in Berlin?
Berlin at that time, anything you wanted to drop was target. It was a large occupied area, and on that one, no warnings were given beforehand. A lot of the targets that we shot at, T-38 would go over, take pictures of it, and we had one squadron in our bomb group, carpetbaggers, and they would fly at night, drop pamphlets over the city. Now I'm looking for a hangar. You're going to get some they got everything they could to scare the people. There were a lot of places, subways, as projected. When you're talking about thousands of people in the city, they don't all make that. I asked him to bring my other car up here. Anytime. Yeah, I'm having fun, but we don't have to record it all. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, we'll get back inside eventually. There's the display in there with the 80mm cannons. Where are you, buddy? That you should look at. I'll go in and explain it to you. But, we had two of those that hit us at the same time, 6 inches behind the pilot seat.
So you never landed with a boat, right?
We did land, sometimes the bomb would hang up. That was the worst worry we had. We would try to go out and release it. But you're walking on this little narrow strip. It's that wide.
Right.
And between the two bomb bays, one of the reaches is 10 feet. Nothing to hang on to. And you're up there with the bomb bays open, looking down 30,000 feet, and trying to get to the bomb that's hung up there. And the only way you could get it would be to kick the bomb and see if you could release it. Sometimes they could have a crowbar and see if they could force it out of it. Yeah. Well, yeah, when you were out there, the bomb bay doors were wide open. You're looking down 30,000 feet. A long way down. We had a few that I didn't know which pavilion you were talking about, but that was in front of the barn, so he said you had to get rid of it. Well, wherever it dropped, that's all. Your object was to get rid of it. And it didn't happen very often. Generally, again, my top turret runner, big tall guy and had long legs, he'd go out there. But like I say, it's 10 feet between the forward bomb bay and the other one. There's no side posts or anything to grab onto. He's hanging on to something up above if he could do it. But not very comfortably. And
Mostly 500 pounders?
mostly 1,000 pounders. We do more missions with 1,000 pounders than small. But you could fly 500 pounders. You put 16 of those in, or 100 pounders. Go way up. Those were usually used for incendiary purposes or sort of common fire.
Dresden is a horrible example of that.
Well,
Seems to be a break.
yeah, I think
Seems to be a break.
As far as that you need to drink.
yeah, it will.
Thank you for your service. Thanks for showing up today.
You bet.
A long time ago. A long time ago.
Hey, yeah. Right there.